So I know we got the autocrosser back on the road, but in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to go back about a month or so from when I was tearing the transmission apart so we can figure out where that snap ring went to and to see if we had any visible damage or can trace down what was actually causing the metallic stuff in the oil. Now it's time to look at my transmission for my MGB GT. Of course, this is a Datsun 280Z gearbox. Now, I am absolutely in no way a transmission expert. This was the first and only transmission I have ever rebuilt. And obviously, I didn't do something right. Because the oil is pretty silvery. Yeah, it's not what we want to see. Now, when I put this thing together, after I got it done, back in the car, I actually ended up finding a snap ring on the workbench that I obviously forgot to put somewhere. But when I was test driving it, it felt fine, it sounded fine, everything was good. The only noise I heard was a slight little chatter from a chipped tooth that I know is on the main shaft. So I said, well, it's only going to be in there for just one season of autocrossing, and it'll be back out because I'll be building a new engine, and then I'll strip it down, figure out where that snap ring went, and go through it again. And well, that didn't happen because I had to move, set up a new shop. Now it's been 3 years since I originally rebuilt this thing. And as of right now, I have no idea what happened to that snap ring. I had a little plastic bin that had a few bits and pieces from this, and the one bearing I couldn't get to replace, and I haven't found it yet. So we're going to go ahead and strip this thing down and see if we can find out what's going on with it. I do think I already know what is going on with it because I did talk to a guy who does rebuild transmissions here locally, or he doesn't anymore, or he's been trying to retire for the last several years. And he's pretty darn sure he knows exactly where I missed the snap ring at. He said in the middle of the stack of gears, there's one snap ring that's kind of easy to overlook. And you can't even see whether it's in there or not with the stack of the gears together. So you have to take the whole stack apart to find out. And what that would allow that one gear to move back and forth a little bit and rub on a thrust washer, which would give me the kind of metallic oil like we're getting. But we're going to find out here. I've had it sitting up here, just sitting up here to drain, trying to make sure we got all the oil out of it. That's why it's stacked on these boards right now, just so it would stay above that. So let's get this thing up in the air, and I'll try to reacquaint myself with how this thing comes apart. I do have a Haynes manual on it, which is what I used last time. And I always figure as long as I got at least some information to work with, I know at least enough to be dangerous, so I will usually jump in and see what I can make happen. But I have noticed, when I was working on this before, that they made a lot of running changes to these things, and there was a lot of differences internally with some of the threads and small detail stuff on these things from year to year to year. And it can be a bit difficult looking through the information, especially if you got the factory manual, to try to decipher exactly what section of the manual you really need to look at for your particular transmission, because the information's a bit sketchy on these things, on exactly, what year, it's to try to decipher exactly what year it is and which version you're actually working with. I can tell you the Haynes manual is somewhat simplified in its information over, say, the factory manual, because it actually only tells you about one 5-speed version of the gearbox, which is the FS5C71A. And they tell you one set of gear ratios for a 240, 260, and one for the 2+2, but I do know that there's at least 3 versions of the different gear ratio packs. And I've got 2 of these gearboxes. One's basically a parts transmission, and when I was working on this one, I tore that one apart and found that a lot of the parts didn't interchange, and the difference is that that one's like a 78 or 79 transmission, we believe, and this one's like a 82, 83 range. But even the threads, the threads were different on some of the nuts. One was coarse, one was fine, and there were other differences. So yeah, there was lots of running changes on these. So it appears the starting point is take the reverse light switch out, which doesn't want to move. Probably should have got the correct size wrench rather than the old strip it wrench, but a little late now. And then we got to take out the speedometer drive gear, and then this pin and circlip for the shifter mechanism. Wow, I tightened everything up tighter than I thought I did. I will have to get an actual wrench for that. But let me... And definitely had the wrong tool for that, but still worked. So we got to get this out of here. And let me get a 10mm for that. But when you look up at the top here, there was an ear that used to be hanging off of here. There's there's ears that hang off these. And early ones have, I guess, 2, and late ones have 1, if I remember correctly. Mine's been cut off. But that's one of the ways to tell the differences between an earlier and later one, if you're really looking at the 5th gear ratio, trying to get a better highway gear versus the earlier one. So now we got this thing up like this. We need to take all of these bolts off here, and I believe we have to take this apart too, but I think that bolt has to come out if I remember correctly. Let me double check that in the book, and we'll keep on going. So yeah, there is a little detent there that goes in there that needs to come out, because you have to be able to pull this out and be able to twist it and move it around to actually get everything to come apart. This doesn't come all the way out. I kind of remember that, but it's a little fidgety. But get all these bolts out of here. So I kind of sort of have some vague memory about how this doesn't just pop right off and drop right on. There's some moving and aligning of things and to get them to sit just right. But it comes off a little easier than I was remembering. I think it's going on because you got to make sure that these line up properly with your forks there. So now that we got the tail housing off, you're only going to see a small portion of the gears here, because there's a whole nut. The rest of the gears are back in on the other side of this plate, so we now need to take off the other end housing. And this is where things start to really deviate from what's in the book, because the book says that this is a 3-piece housing, and they're just going to take the bell housing off and then take this off, which obviously this is just 1 piece. So if I remember correctly, the way I did it last time is we went ahead and took this front plate off. And you do have to make note of the shims that are in here to make sure you put it together correctly. And then I think we ought to take this snap ring here off, and then we can separate the bell housing from the center bit. All right, so we got a few taps on the housing to get that bearing to go through there. And it should be coming out, but as of yet it's not. There it goes. So there we got our gear stack, and somewhere in the middle of this gear stack there's a snap ring that holds one gear from moving back and forth that I think is the one that we're missing. And so now I just have to disassemble the whole thing and figure out which one it is. So I didn't go through the full disassembly procedure on camera here, but I did figure out where my missing C-clip goes. And this is the main shaft through here. When this first set of gears goes on here, there's a clip that goes right here that was missing. So that's the clip I didn't put in. And once you put the next stack of gears on, you can't see it. And it actually almost doesn't even look like there's supposed to be one there unless you're paying attention, which I evidently wasn't paying quite enough attention. But I haven't really seen anything throughout the whole process that really tells me where all the metal is coming from. I don't see a lot of wear on the side of the gears, but I do see on the shaft here a little bit of discoloration right here, which means that without that circlip there, maybe this thing, the sleeve that goes here, might have been spinning on the shaft a little bit, and that might be what I've been getting the metal from. Now I just got to find that C-clip, and I do know that it was in a plastic container that was with this bearing, because I didn't replace this one bearing because I didn't have a puller anywhere in my stuff where I could take this apart with. And I actually ended up putting a chip in the corner of one or two of these teeth, trying, and that's when I gave up and said, I'm not replacing that bearing. So as soon as I dig around enough to find that bearing, which is, I know what the box looks like, the C-clip will be with that. So now I just got to find that, and then I can look at putting this thing back together. So now I'm several hours into struggling my way through putting this thing back together after finding a circlip to put on there, or snap ring to put on that one gear, and getting everything stacked back in, because I could not get the main shaft here through the bearing that's right here. It just didn't want to go through for some reason. It came out, but it wouldn't go back in. Just couldn't quite get everything quite lined up right. And there's a little like ball bearing just like that with a little thrust washer about the same as this but a little thinner, that's got a notch in it that slides over top of that, and that's what keeps it all in place. So clamped in the vise the way it was supposed to, the way they say to do it, if you tap on it to try to push it through the bearing, then either the bearing would just slide out, or that thrust washer would just pop out of place, and then you couldn't put it back in place. And finally I just decided to stack it up this way, zip tie everything together to hold it, leave the bearing out, so load everything in, and then push the bearing in from the top side. It's not at all how they tell you to do it in a book, but that's what ended up working for me. But then I keep having these issues where, like, once I did finally get that all figured out, I put the plate on, start stacking all the gears, figure out how to get the check ball and the little check ball with the little ball bearing in place, which they don't like to go in and out super easy. Then I realized I forgot the reverse gear idler shaft. So I got to take all that back apart because this plate holds that in. And you can't put that in with the plate in. So I'd take it all back apart, get that in, start getting everything stacked back together, and I get this gear on and realized, well, I hadn't put the snap ring on the reverse gear idler, which means all that has to come back off because you can't put that on any other way. So yeah, we're having fun here today, but like I said, I am not a transmission guy. This is pretty new stuff to me, and the last time I looked at any of this was 3 years ago. And I'm really struggling to remember any of what I did then. But it's coming along. I don't see anything at this point that looks like it's damaged noticeably to where it'll prevent the transmission from operating correctly. So hopefully we can just finish putting it back together, put it in the car, and not have any issues with it. Okay, well, I think I now have this thing together. It's all rotating pretty smoothly here. Got all my shift forks, I believe, all in the right positions. I remember last time I had to go through some of this stuff a couple different times. But let me see here. Pushing this rod, one of them should be second gear and the other's first. So that looks like first gear. And then third. Fourth. That should be fifth. Something might be rubbing slightly. I'll have to check some clearances. And reverse. All right, the only issues I'm seeing might be in fifth and reverse. Something feels a little tight, maybe rubbing slightly, so we'll have to check some clearances, see what the book shows, and rectify any kind of thing I might find wrong there, and then we can try to put it back in the casing. All right, well, I got it back in the casing. Now for the moment of truth here. Yeah, so it'll spin. Now, first gear. Second gear. Third gear. Fourth gear. Fifth gear. And reverse. So I think we're going to be okay. So now I still got to get some new oil to put in it, and got some other little bits of things to do to the car before I can actually put this on the engine and drop it in.